ladies and gentlemen, to the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm your host, Aaron Dykes, on this Tuesday, September 25th, 2012.
Tonight, shocking images of a state-sponsored execution in China as a villager is brutally crushed to death after refusing a forced government relocation. Then, Monsanto launches damage control over GMO cancer study. Plus, Harvard researchers now ridiculously insist that fluoride only lowers IQ levels outside the United States. Yeah, right. And Alex Jones talks with Amy Larson, who was recently arrested for writing 9/11 was an inside job on the sidewalk. That's coming up next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
Tonight in news, a shocking and graphic story as a man was trampled underneath a street paving car on orders of a Chinese Communist Party official in China. A villager in northern China was resisting a forced government relocation and tried to remain on his land and was instead brutally crushed to death by a road flattening truck on orders of a Chinese government official. The victim was He Zihua, and he refused to accept the paltry money they gave him under the pretense of eminent domain, telling him to move away from his land, and instead laid down in the path of the construction workers, refusing to leave his property, and his reward for standing up to that was death in this world. But he's surely made a mark for land rights and for individual rights across the world. This is just another horrific example of the face of tyranny, not just in China, but around the world. This is New World Order behavior, ready to relocate anyone in their path and ready to kill anyone who stands up to that. It's extremely reminiscent of the Tiananmen Square massacres that happened in 1989. Hundreds and hundreds, actually I read the number was 1,400 protesters killed by tanks and otherwise killed by government soldiers. Of course, there was that one iconic tank man who stood up to the tanks, blocked their path, and at least one of the tank drivers showed his humanity and was not able to just brutally run someone over. But this is just one more protest in the ongoing current occupation of China, of villagers saying no to attempts to steal their crops, to take over the land and turn it over to commercial development. In most cases, they weren't even told that their land was being sold off by the Chinese party officials, and so they are rightfully outraged. There's been riots in all kinds of Chinese villages. We've covered some of those stories over the years. There's so many of them, though, but it's good to see someone standing up. Of course, they have tried to suppress this story, keeping it out of the state-controlled media, trying to keep it off of the web, but news is spreading here at Infowars.com. It was posted on DrudgeReport.com, and it's otherwise going across the alternate, so something to keep in mind there in China. This story also brings to mind the horrific example that happened with Rachel Corrie in Gaza. She was a protester trying to block literal bulldozers about to steam over Palestinian homes and what have you, and she was, well, it's debated, but she was run over by the bulldozer. Her parents sued the government, raised a lawsuit, and ultimately they didn't win that lawsuit, but they did point out the fact that she was basically murdered, as this Chinese villager clearly was as well. And it's really the kind of eminent domain disregard for human life we're going to see under Agenda 21. We turn now to For Rent, your very own Agenda 21 shoebox apartment, how they're springing up in New York, in Boston, and now in San Francisco, little micro apartments being sold on the trendiness and cuteness, aimed at single individuals living in very tiny homes. In the case of San Francisco, they actually had to drop the minimum requirements for housing spaces. They're trying to re-regulate that, so even smaller apartments are allowed. The minimum size just for a living room is larger than the type of apartment they're trying to construct in San Francisco for $1,400 to $1,900 a month, a little tiny micro 225 square foot apartment. Once you take out the space for closets and bathrooms, that's 150 square feet, 10 by 15. That's the compacting. That is Agenda 21, trying to eliminate the family, create living spaces that aren't big enough to have children in, or spouses or pets. They want to compact everyone into tightly regulated zones where no one could be sustainable. All in the name of sustainable development, of course. This is taking people out of rural areas, driving them into the integrated, compacted cities that they plan under all this smart growth and other related plans. And it's just to make people dependent on government, unable to take care of themselves, and of course to make some rent money and destroy other living options. And this all ties into an update I filed. It's a follow-up to our more thorough investigation on Agenda 21 and the way they're taking over at the local level by pushing smart growth, by pushing sustainable communities, and trying to talk even rural towns into building these concentrated development zones, places where in particular they want people to live in the same buildings they work. They call them shop houses. They already have that in China too, by the way, the dormitories where they pack 5 people into a room and you live in slave conditions and then you work all day in the factories and the workers want to kill themselves. Well, that's the kind of thing they're bringing home to America. It's that planned society that is such a bad idea. Unless you're a control freak New World Order system, then it's exactly what you want. Here's that report now. Aaron Dykes here with a quick update from Infowars.com investigating the stealth implementation of the United Nations Agenda 21 right here in the United States under the name of Sustainable Communities. So why is this important? To oppose Agenda 21 is to oppose the planned society. As the cartoon Plandopolis tried to convince us.
I'm looking forward to showing you around Plandopolis today.
Where we were told how great life would be under a centralized system.
No, not me. It's not your birthday. The Global Food Council are doing a really good job of keeping food production going.
Directed by technology.
Switch off brain and go to work. With this many people around, I'm glad there's a mega computer in charge.
Despite the fact that our lives would be tightly controlled, including calorie restrictions.
Have you got your calorie card open on your smartphone?
Transportation restrictions.
I registered your visit with Flick Travel Corp the other day, so they've allotted you a journey time.
People have asked, what's so bad about Agenda 21? The founders believed in a separation of powers. But the modern-day framers worked through the United Nations, through bankers working with communist and collectivist systems, and through environmental groups who want to seize land and redirect it for the vision of a few who wish to rule from the top. It's taking away our free will. You know, the American way. To fight against Agenda 21 is to oppose the straitjacket being imposed upon us under global and environmental pretexts. I want you to think for a minute about the existing neighborhood and housing regulations people voluntarily sign up for when they move into different neighborhoods, how tall your grass can be, whether or not you can have a basketball court or a fishing boat or an RV in your front yard, or in many cases even in your backyard. You've seen the news articles where people aren't allowed to grow gardens in many areas. That is nothing compared to what's coming. If you followed the cap-and-trade laws that they tried to pass through Congress that were narrowly defeated only because there was a huge outcry, those thousands of pages were going to implement all kinds of new regulations on people's homes, on the kind of cars they can drive, on top of the already existing